Hello, Telvani here, and today I wanted to share with you the strongest build I've played in Path of Exile 2 Early Access, boasting massive damage, screen-wide clear, a zoomy playstyle, and great defenses. I am of course talking about Attribute Stacking Gemling Legionnaire. Now I just want to say that I've seen a lot of other build guides out there for attribute stackers, some done well, others less so, but none of them were quite what I was looking for. None of them ticked all the boxes for me, which is why I've decided to make this video. Because I think what I'm doing here is different enough from the slew of other videos out there that it warrants mention. And I've got to say it, this build feels amazing to play, even on a budget. And just a disclaimer for those of you watching, I don't have an Ascendancy yet, and all of the background footage of this video is the build without one. Alright, so let's get into the build. At this point, I'm pretty much just running Tempest Flurry. Because this skill moves your character a few steps ahead of your current position when you use it, at a high enough attack speed, it becomes significantly faster than walking. This is what gives us that zoomy playstyle. And even though we'll be zipping around the map with Tempest Flurry, I do recommend setting up Blink just on your back bar to get over some of those pesky ledges in certain maps, but for the majority of your gameplay, you will be using Tempest Flurry to move around. On the very early budget version of the build, you'll use Stormwave for clear instead of Tempest Flurry. This is because your attack speed won't be high enough to make Tempest Flurry movement feel good yet, so I'll make sure to include both setups in the written build guide linked in the description below. I think the breakpoint for where I would start using Tempest Flurry over kind of walking, Blink, and Stormwave as your main movement is around 12 to 13 attacks per second with Tempest Flurry. So keep that in mind when trying to decide which version of the build is right for you. As for our other skills, we've got Charged Staff as well, and this will just give us a little bit of a buff to our damage and our reach. We've also got Tempest Bell and Conductivity for bosses. Speaking of skills, I want to take a moment to go over our Herald setup. This is some pretty common tech that I argue all attack-based builds should be taking advantage of while mapping. On our Herald of Ice, we are running Lightning Infusion, and on our Herald of Thunder, we are running Cold Infusion. This will cause it so that our Herald of Ice is dealing a lot of lightning damage, and thus shocking enemies, and our Herald of Lightning is dealing a lot of cold damage, and thus freezing enemies. This will allow Herald of Lightning to proc Herald of Ice, and Herald of Ice to proc Herald of Lightning, leading to a sort of feedback loop that allows you to just absolutely obliterate screens. Getting into the gear. In typical attribute stacking fashion, we're using the common combination of Pillar of the Caged God and Hand of Wisdom in Action. Pillar of the Caged God is scaling our attack speed and our weapon damage to the roof at the cost of not really having any weapon damage on itself. This is where Hand of Wisdom in Action comes in, giving us a lot of flat added lightning damage to our attacks. These two items are basically the only mandatory items for this build, and I do not recommend trying to play this unless you can afford them both. The weapon, Pillar of the Caged God, is pretty cheap, but the gloves, Hand of Wisdom in Action, run about 2 to 3 divines for kind of a mediocre pair. For the weapon, there are a few things to be on the lookout for. You can either get an attack speed corruption with 2 sockets. This enchant, as the trade website calls it, can roll anywhere from 6 to 8%. Alternatively, you could go for a 3rd socket corruption, which might be a little bit cheaper. And finally, you could maybe go for a 12% weapon damage per 5 strength corruption. All 3 of these are very solid options with varying price tags attached. Find one that works well for you. As for soul cores and what you're going to socket into those weapons, early on you might find it advantageous to run penetration, but in the very end game, you'll probably want to go for something like attack speed. Now, this next part is very important, and I can't stress this enough. For our helmet, I'm going to actually recommend that you use an Atziri's Disdain. On my character personally, you can see that I have 3.3k energy shield, but if I take this helmet off, I drop all the way down to only 700 energy shield. Having that big energy shield pool from Atziri's Disdain is absolutely enormous for general mapping. as with Grim Feast, you're going to be sitting at around 7k energy shield at all times, making us nearly unkillable. The Black Sun Crest helmet is technically more damage. However, the defensive trade-off for a low to medium budget just does not make it worth running Black Sun Crest, in my opinion. However, in the very, very late game, perhaps with an Ascendancy and some damage taken as mana jewels, you could probably afford to lose some of the defenses from running Atziri's Disdain, as those expensive items like Ascendancy will bolster your effective hit pool quite a bit. However, for those of us who don't have 200 divines to drop on an amulet, Atziri's Disdain is going to keep you alive through your maps. Alright, moving on to our chest, I am running a Warrior Invictus with attributes and all resistances. This particular version of this chest is a little bit pricey right now. However, before I got this chest, I was using just an all attributes and mana one, which is going to be significantly less expensive and probably only cost you around the same as a pair of Hoa gloves. Either way, you'll want to pick up an Attribute Warrior Invictus as soon as possible, as the 20 to 25% increase to all attributes is a very, very solid choice for this build. Moving on to our rings, this is another place where I'm sort of diverging from what I've seen a lot of other people doing. I'm going to recommend that flat added cold damage to attacks should be your number one priority when looking for rings. Obviously, also use your rings to balance out any missing resistances, and it's a good place to also pick up some extra attributes. Additionally, if you can, snagging some rarity here would be great, but whatever kind of rings you end up picking up, go for a high amount of flat added cold damage on them. The reason for this is that it will help immensely with freezing enemies, which is very important not just defensively, but to make mapping in general feel good. We're already getting a lot of flat lightning damage from our gloves, so on that front we should be good. We should be getting a lot of shocks, a lot of lightning damage off on everything, but cold damage is really what we need to get those freezes off. This will allow both Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder to proliferate off of each other very easily. And this combination of high cold damage and high lightning damage is what is going to allow you to clear multiple screens at a time with a chain of explosions. So please, 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 make sure you're getting cold damage on your rings. Moving on, we have our amulet. Basically, you just want as many attributes as you can get on the suffixes, and then increased maximum energy shield, life, and at least 30 spirit on the prefixes. Ideally, you'd also like to get this on a stellar amulet, and with higher energy shield and maximum life than I have here, but I just settled on this one for now. In the budget version of the build, when you are still kind of running Stormwave, you don't need to worry about getting one with spirit. Obviously, the biggest upgrade here would be an Ascendancy, but that is a very, very late game upgrade, and probably one of the very last things you'll be looking to pick up. As for our belt, Ingenuity is going to be your best in slot, as it will increase all of the damage, attributes, and resistances we have on our rings, but it is by no means mandatory, and before you get Ingenuity, just go ahead and grab a rare belt with some life, mana, strength, and resistances. Next, our shoes aren't really anything special, just movement speed, resistances, attributes, life, and mana. Finally, because of the way we are pathing on the skill tree, we are able to get 2 charm slots. I'd strongly recommend a Thawing Charm and a Stone Charm to protect you from both freezes and stuns. Speaking of the skill tree, let's take a look at that now. We're doing a pretty typical route for the Attribute Stacker, grabbing Strength, Dex, and Intelligence on our travel nodes and coming down and then around the side of the tree. I've set up a Curse bar swap, but this isn't necessarily mandatory, and I would say only grab Resonance here if you're not running the budget setup and you do have a Spirit Amulet. But again, reference the link in the description below for a more detailed view of the skill tree. The last thing I really want to mention here is that Lucidity is incredibly strong. It gives us plus 15 intelligence for 3 points, and it causes us to take 16% of our damage taken from mana instead of life. For this build, Lucidity is just effectively 16% less damage taken, as our life pool will run out years before our mana pool ever will. Moving on, one of the benefits of this build is that we get a ton of jewel sockets. At the bottom of the tree, this is a perfect spot for an Against the Darkness jewel. We have a lot of small passives and notable passives in Radius, and I'd strongly recommend getting a 4% cold damage jewel for the same reason that we wanted cold damage on our rings. This cold damage is going to be crucial for helping our character get a bunch of freezes, and by extension, Herald procs, and just generally make the build feel buttery smooth to play. As for our other jewels, you really want to get some recover 2% of life on kill and recover 2% of mana on kill jewels. These are going to keep you topped up throughout your mapping experience. Additionally, between our passive tree and our jewels, you will want to pick up a minimum of 50% cold and lightning penetration. Next, for our jewels, on any sapphire jewel that you are running, try and get increased maximum energy shield. This is going to synergize incredibly well with our Atziri's Disdain helmet, and in combination, this is what allows you to reach that 3,000 or 4,000 energy shield on this build before Grim Feast. The last thing I really want to mention here about jewels, and it's somewhat of an important one actually, is that we really want to be grabbing increased freeze buildup and increased freeze buildup with quarterstaffs wherever possible. Again, this is going to help us get those freezes off consistently, regardless of the modifiers on our map, and regardless of party size. Freezes. This is what is going to make the build shine, and allow us to proliferate heralds into eternity. Finishing off the skill tree, let's take a look at the Ascendancy. We're passing through adaptive capability so that we can get to enhanced effectiveness. As an attribute stacker, this is going to give us a ton of life, accuracy, and mana. And then for our other two Ascendancy points, we are taking integrated efficiency and thaumaturgical infusion. This will allow us to stack a bunch of gems that we are not actively using in the build in order to gain a ton of extra maximum resistances, making this incredibly tanky build even stronger. I'll have the links for the skills to make this build work in the written guide as well. Wrapping up, I really just want to drive home the following points. Atziri's Disdain. Run it. It's a huge defensive upgrade. Cold damage on rings should be your number one priority when looking for stats. Jewels, look for freeze buildup and energy shield. And between the tree and jewels, make sure you are reaching at least 15% lightning and cold penetration. Anyway, hope this build guide helped. Thank you for watching. Good luck with your early access, and I'll see you in the next one.